What's up, guys? We're back with another hot take video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I put the call out on Twitter. Send me your unpopular opinions, your hot takes, your things that you want to get out there in terms of opinions when it comes to fighting games. And I'm going to be reviewing some of the ones that I liked and kind of saying whether I agree with them or not and what my general thoughts are. So let's jump right into the list here. Alright, first up here, Marvel Infinite deserved the chance that was afforded to Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Launch MVCI was better than Vanilla Cross Tekken. Imagine what they could have done with an EVO run and a, quote, version 2018. So, I do kind of agree that launch Marvel Infinite was better than launch Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Street Fighter Cross Tekken was pretty disastrous at launch. I think not a lot of people liked how it played. People didn't like the balance. People didn't like all the timeouts. It kind of took them about a year or so to get the game patched into a state where people really liked it and add a bunch of more characters in. So it would be interesting to see what would have happened with MVCI had they given it a little bit more support. Maybe we could have got more of the characters that everyone wanted in the game to be into the game. There were rumors of an X-Men DLC pack that never ended up happening, so maybe if the game sold a little bit better, that actually would have happened, but as is, I don't really agree with the premise that a game, like, deserves a chance just because, you know, it's a Capcom game or just because it's part of a beloved franchise. Like, if no one's playing the game, it doesn't make sense to have the game at EVO. And no one was playing MVCI. Like, just going based on my own stream and videos, like, no one was watching content for MVCI. It was not that easy to find matches, even, like, less than a week after the game was out. No one was playing this game, so I definitely think they made the right choice not having it at EVO, but it is interesting to imagine what would have happened. If the game had been supported a little bit better, maybe it could have ended up being a beloved aspect of the FGC, but that did not happen. Fortunately or unfortunately, MVCI is pretty much dead now. Next up, a lot of special move motions should just be eradicated to accommodate for pad players. They're a weird legacy from arcades, and it's not like stick players can't do the motions, pad players can. It hinders the player choice of controllers. So, I agree with the notion that unnecessarily difficult input motions, there's no reason to have them anymore. Like, if a move is something that you're expected to be doing all the time, like if it's like a normal special move or it's a super that you're expected to hit confirm into regularly, it doesn't make sense to give it like a quarter circle back, half circle forward motion, or like a double quarter circle forward. I think the time for that is probably gone. Skullgirls was an example of a game where literally everything in that game is fireballs and DPs, and similarly Dragon Ball FighterZ, literally everything in that game is a fireball motion, so I think that that's the way to go. Like, there's not much reason to have them, but I don't know about the whole like pad versus stick thing. I don't really see pad players at any kind of disadvantage when it comes to inputting more complicated special moves. Like, the input leniency is such in modern games that really there's no advantage to playing on stick, so I don't really think stick versus pad like comes into the equation here, but I do agree that there's no reason for like the crazy old-timey special move inputs when we can simplify things without sacrificing any depth, really. Alright, next up, auto combos should never be a forced mechanic in a fighting game, only as a selectable option. So I would say I disagree pretty strongly with this. I don't really like the sort of like gating off of the beginner options, kind of like what Guilty Gear does. They have like stylish mode. I don't really like having that relegated to a mode. I prefer it when it's like that's just what the game is, but there's a ramp up from, you know, you can do really easy basic stuff that doesn't do that much damage, like auto combos. You can do that, and then as you improve at the game, you know, you're going to find that you need more damage if you want to compete, so then you're forced to sort of optimize a little bit more. I think that's generally the way it should go. I really don't like splitting the player base into, like, the real players and then the people playing on beginner mode, because no one ever wants to play on beginner mode anyway. It just, I feel like, doesn't do anything to help introduce people to the game, and it only makes them like the game less. But yeah, so as for auto combos being a forced mechanic, I think the big issue that people have with auto combos in Dragon Ball FighterZ is that they are extremely strong outside of their purpose as a combo, right? You know what I mean? Like, if the purpose of an auto combo is like, it's something that you do when you get a hit that allows you to get more damage than just like a single move, but not as much damage as an optimized combo. I think that's what auto combos should be. But what they are in Dragon Ball FighterZ is a lot more than that. They're powerful neutral tools. They're like pokes. They are reversal tools in a sense. If you're Bardock, you can mess up people's cross-ups and stuff. They do a lot. So I think that's where the problem comes in. So I think maybe nerfing their utility a little bit outside of their use as a combo could maybe make it more of a beginner option, which I think is what it's for. It's there for beginners, but the problem is it's just so good that everyone is using it, you know, whether they're good at the game or not. So yeah, I don't have a problem with auto combos conceptually, although their implementation in Dragon Ball FighterZ does lead to some pretty wacky gameplay, so I'd maybe like to see them adjusted in the future. Next up, another Dragon Ball related one. Dragon Ball FighterZ Raw Tag and Super Dash in neutral are fair mechanics that the game is already balanced around. They don't need to be nerfed. People need to get good. So there's a difference, I think, that needs to be clarified here between something being well balanced and something being like fun or like good for the game. I agree that Raw Tag and Super Dash are well balanced mechanics because every character has access to them. And like, yes, you do Super Dash and Raw Tag like 10 times a match. You do it a lot, but it's not like it's like the only thing you do in the game. It's not like the entirety of neutral is predicated around Raw Tag and Super Dash. Although now that I'm saying that, sometimes it do be that way. Sometimes it does feel that way. But in terms of balance, I think I agree. Yes, they are balanced mechanics. They are not game-breaking mechanics, but as for sort of fun and interest to the game, do I think they really add that? I think at low levels, for sure, Super Dash adds fun to the game. It makes it so that if you're just picking up the game, you can instantly start having fun by just pressing one button. All you do is Super Dash, and then maybe start mashing square, and cool stuff is going to happen, and you're going to be able to start having fun without having to spend a ton of time in training mode. So I think it's good at that. But the issue is, like Raw Tag and Super Dash, the effect they have on the game at high level. Super Dash bothers me less than Raw Tag, because the problem I have with Raw Tag is, because Raw Tag is so strong, and don't get it twisted, Raw Tag is an extremely powerful mechanic. This is probably the strongest Raw Tag has ever been in any fighting game. It's very, very powerful, and because it's so powerful, it makes it really easy to switch characters, which makes matches take a long time. I think most people generally agree, maybe some of you don't, but I think most people are on the same page that matches are a little too slow in Dragon Ball FighterZ. They get too close to timeout too often when two good players are playing. And I think part of the reason for that is that you're just recovering so much life because you're tagging out all the time. So I think that causes an issue. And Super Dash, although I don't think it's as big of a problem as Raw Tag, I just don't find it very fun or interesting when your game plan is literally just like jump above the opponent and then Super Dash, and then they have to guess, you know, are you going to Super Dash early or late? Are you going to call an assist first to stop them from 2H'ing? I just don't really find that to be interesting gameplay. I find it to be kind of like boring, and the fact that every character has access to Super Dash, and that being one of the most powerful mechanics in the game, makes every matchup play the same. So I'm not a fan of that. I would like to see these two mechanics nerfed in the future. And it's not really for balance reasons, but it's just for gameplay interest reasons. I think the game would be more interesting if matches were shorter, it was harder to tag out, and the game would be more interesting if Super Dash wasn't such a powerful universal mechanic that's how every character plays. Every character, their game plan revolves around Super Dash to a pretty big degree, and I think that makes all the characters feel a little bit samey, so I would like to see that changed. So I guess I agree with this tweet that they're fair mechanics. I realized I just ranted for like 5 minutes. I agree they're fair mechanics and they don't need to be nerfed, but personally I would like to see them nerfed because I think that it would improve the game. So let's move on. Alright, last Dragon Ball FighterZ one here. All Krillin needs to be at least B+ tier is another rock, you know? Can't help but agree with this one. I think if we gave him one more rock, I think he would shoot straight to B tier. I think if we gave him 2 more rocks, so all of a sudden he's throwing 4 rocks with the EX rock, I think he's S tier at that point. So Bandai Namco, Arc System Works, if you guys are listening, more rocks please. It's what the people demand. More games need to implement selectable assists the same way Skullgirls does. So if you guys don't know how Skullgirls works, you can literally input any move that your character has access to and use that as the assist. So you can have, you know, throw be their assist. You can have crouching heavy punch be their assist. You can have like any special move, any normal, anything can be the assist. So this is really cool. And Skullgirls especially, it has, you know, a pretty small roster. It was like 8 at launch or something. Now they're up to like 12. I don't know how many exactly they have, but it's a small roster, and I think that having the assists like this, the infinite possibilities of assists, makes team building a lot more open-ended. You can do really unique and interesting team compositions with the custom assist system. So I do think it is cool, but I understand why more games aren't doing this. It is gonna be a real problem to balance. It's so hard to design around the idea that any move that you give a character, you have to be really, really careful and think, is this move gonna be a broken assist? And like Skullgirls does have some pretty absurd assists, you know, like Saracopter and Cerebella quarter circle forward heavy, Philia hairball, like all these things. It has some pretty insane assists, but I think in the end, they're still balanced enough, and there's like an interesting and diverse assortment of teams that you can make. It's not like everybody's running the same assist, so I think they did a great job with that, but it is a daunting challenge, and I can see why other developers would be afraid to implement it, because it's very, very scary, especially when you're adding DLC characters every year. Like, what if just one of these characters, one of their moves just happens to be so good that this becomes the go-to assist on every team? It's kind of scary having that opportunity of any move that your character has being a potential assist. It's very, very scary. So I would definitely like to see more games attempt it. I agree with that, but I understand why more of them aren't. So it's tough. All right, next up, Tekken isn't harder than any other fighting game to learn. I feel like people overrate its difficulty. I'm gonna give like a half agree to this one as well. Yes, people do overrate how difficult Tekken is. And the thing is, like, you can go in and start playing Tekken and, like, go online and get wins and everything. You can do all this without learning frame data, without going to, you know, YouTube and looking up your punishes and stuff, your I-10 punishes. You can do fine at Tekken without knowing any of this stuff. That is for sure. You can pick up and play Tekken and have fun and not take it too seriously. But if you're trying to sort of graduate to the level where you want to get to high ranks, you maybe want to go to a tournament or two and not go 0-2, maybe like have a positive win rate at a tournament, stuff like that, Tekken becomes really hard. Tekken becomes really, really hard because the level of knowledge you need in Tekken is pretty insane. Like, just the sheer amount of matchup knowledge you need. Some of you guys might not know this, but I have a little notebook that is just literally notes that I've taken playing Tekken, and I would bring this to Evo and stuff like that. Before every matchup, I would look up what character my opponent's playing, be like, oh, Zhao Yu, you can punish this with this, or like, oh, Akuma, make sure if he does rage art that you're ready to jump it, like all this stuff. Which characters are weaker to sidestep left versus sidestep right? That's a big thing you need to know. So I have all these notes for this game that I don't even play that much anymore. Because that is like the level of sort of knowledge you need to get to the next level in Tekken. So anyway, long story short, I agree that people overrate how hard Tekken is. I think that if you're afraid of learning Tekken because you think it's too hard, don't be. You can jump in and instantly start having fun, and I think it's a rewarding game at all skill levels. But in the end, like, to get to high level, Tekken asks a lot of you. Just because of the nature of it, just because they've been building systems upon systems that have existed for so many years. Character move lists are huge. There's a lot to learn, so it can be a very hard game if you want to get to that next level, but definitely don't let that scare you off of picking up Tekken. Alright, 2D fighting games that have distinct character archetypes are impossible to balance well. Parentheses, MK and Justice. So what's weird to me about this tweet is, why are MK and Injustice the only examples of 2D fighting games with distinct character archetypes? Like, that's strange to me. What about Street Fighter? What about KOF? What about Samurai Showdown? Like, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I agree that definitely the more unique the characters are, the harder they are to balance, right? Like, a game full of characters who play like Ryu is a lot more balanced than a game full of some characters that play like Dhalsim and some characters that play like Zangief. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the more divergent the characters become, the harder it is to balance. Like that's for sure. But to say that it's impossible to balance them well, I definitely disagree with that. I think Street Fighter 4 is, well, some versions. Ultra Street Fighter 4, the final version of Street Fighter 4, once they had a few years of updates to get things balanced, I think that game's extremely well balanced. Ultra Street Fighter 4 and like Super Street Fighter 4 was another one. Extremely balanced games. So there's definitely examples of well-balanced 2D fighting games. It's not impossible at all. Fighting someone who is randomly mashing is harder and more annoying than fighting someone who just outplays you. There's a lot more to learn being outplayed. Also, it's more fun to get bodied than to lose because you got bardocked. So I have some feelings about this one. I mean, let's just get it out of the way. In terms of like how it feels to play someone and lose. Like, yes, I will give you that if you're playing someone who is just mashing or whatever, it really feels bad and it's not fun, and you would rather be playing someone who's like thinking things through a little bit more. Like, yes, I will go ahead and say that yes, your feelings are valid. I understand what you mean, but okay, let's talk about is it harder? The crux of this tweet for me is I feel like it's a bit of a contradiction to say it's harder to fight someone who randomly mashes, but also there's a lot more to learn by fighting someone who doesn't randomly mash. Do you understand how these seem like they're kind of contradictory statements? If you're having a harder time against someone who's mashing LLL and Super Dash as Bardock, that person has a lot to teach you. You can learn a lot from playing that person. Sure, you might not be having fun while you're doing it because you feel like you're not really interacting with the other player. They're just running their game plan and you're either adjusting to it or not adjusting to it. But definitely don't underestimate the experience that someone who you think like is bad at the game or is just a masher. Don't underrate how valuable that experience is, because if you're playing with this mindset of like, okay, well, I lost to a Bardock masher or whatever, but let's ignore that because at some point I'll get to the level where everyone I'm playing against is a good player. I'm not going to be fighting Bardock mashers anymore because I'll be, you know, Super Saiyan Rose rank or whatever, and they won't be there anymore. If you're operating under that sort of expectation set, you're always going to be disappointed because you will never not be facing people who you think are random or are just doing crazy stuff or they're not thinking things through. You will always be facing these people. So you really need to treat matches as a learning opportunity, even if you think that you're smarter than the other guy. Like, if you're losing to it, he's got to be onto something, right? Like, yes, if you're just getting mashed on and you're just beating these people over and over, then yes, there's no point in playing someone repeatedly that you're just going to destroy. But if you're having a hard time against these people, if you're having a Gandhi versus FSP moment where you're losing to these people that you feel like you don't deserve to, instead of just writing them off and being like, I lost because he was a scrub, think, why did I actually lose? And what can this person teach me so that I can apply this when I have similar matches in the future? Because you're going to. At every level of play, you're going to face people who you think are random or they don't deserve to beat you. They only beat me because he was mashing. You're always going to face these people. So you got to learn how to learn from it and not just write it off as a waste of your time. Alright, last one here. Fighting game characters have boiled down to the same 6-ish archetypes since the 80s. Generic protagonist character, clone of protagonist, evil McBad guy, super extra evil guy, big titty waifu bait, and fat guy. I noticed it when Sam Show came out, changed my mind. So it's definitely true that fighting games tend to go to the same tropes a lot. Like, how many fighting games have like a Ryu and a Ken, right? Characters who are kind of rivals with each other. One of them is the main character of the game. One of them is like a similar moveset, but maybe like kind of a bad boy. Or how many games have like an Akuma character who like is just pure evil or purely focused on power, and he like has sold his soul for extra damage or whatever. Like and then how many fighting games have like a huge guy who sits on you? How many of them have like a pretty lady who kicks you a bunch and is acrobatic? Like, yes, these tropes exist in every fighting game, but not every character falls into one of these archetypes. Like, where's Dalsim? Which one of these do you think Dalsim is? Which one do you think Blanca is? Which one do you think, like, Krillin is? Or Yamcha? Or, you know, all kinds of stuff. Not every character fits in here. But I do think that, like, there is some value to tropes, right? There is some value to them because you can instantly be playing a game for the first time, and instead of just a character select screen of characters that you have no idea what their deal is, you can't really identify with them, you can at least see, like, oh, this is the Ryu of this game. Oh, this is the Zangief of this game. This is the Chun-Li of this game. You can sort of have something to pick up on. It's kind of like why you see the same sort of character archetypes in fiction as well. You know, you see the Han Solo type, the Indiana Jones type, like whatever, the roguish bad boy. You see these same people across multiple books and movies and stuff just because the audience can come in with their pre-existing notions of what it means, and they'll have something to grab onto even if everything else is foreign to them. It's like Guilty Gear, I think, is an example of a game where, except for two characters, except for Kai and Soul, the roster is pretty zany. The roster, it's hard to get a grip on what these characters are about. But at the end of the day, Kai and Soul, you can still go and be like, oh, I get it. They're like Ryu and Ken. They're like two sides of the same coin, kind of. I guess Potemkin is another one. Like, you can look at him and be like, oh, he's the big guy. He's the grappler. But anyway, it's nice to have these little bits of normalcy that you can grab onto in a game where otherwise, you know, you're completely unfamiliar with all the characters and you don't really know what they mean. So anyway, not every character fits into these archetypes, but I do agree that you do see the same sort of character tropes a lot, but I do think that there's a good reason for that. But of course, I would like to see more creativity in fighting games as well. Although, I do think some fighting games are doing a great job of it. Some of the new characters in games like Samurai Showdown, they've had some really interesting DLC, as well as like Skullgirls, I thought was a great example of really interesting, unique character designs that don't fit into obvious tropes. And then, you know, like I said, Guilty Gear, I think, is another example as well. But anyway, so a lot of games are fighting against this, but a lot of them fall into it as well. But overall, I don't think it's that big of a problem. Anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. As always, thank you so much for sending me in your hot takes. Make sure you're following me at Crofts on Twitter if you're not already. That way you'll know when is the next time I'm doing one of these, so that you can send your unpopular opinions in, and I'll react to those as well. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.